Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. It's been nearly 2 years since that fateful Christmas party, yet the memory of that night refuses to fade. Every sensation, every sound, every flicker of light remains vivid. The steady pulse of the music seems to play on in my head, and I can still feel the warmth of the room mingling with the glow of the string lights that wrapped the venue in a festive charm. The entire company was present, immersed in laughter, drinks in hand, dressed to the nines. Beside me, Tiffany, my wife, stood out like a star in her shimmering red dress, exuding elegance. To understand the significance of that evening, let me rewind. Tiffany and I had been together for 8 years, 5 of them as husband and wife. From the outside, we seemed like the couple everyone aspired to be, or so I thought. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but I believed our love was solid, unshakable. Tiffany was everything one might hope for, brilliant, quick-witted, and excelling in her career as a marketing director. I admired her accomplishments and trusted her completely. When Christmas rolled around, her company organized a grand holiday party. Attendance wasn't optional. It was expected for employees and their partners. Her boss, Rick, had made that clear. "It's supposed to be some team-building thing," Tiffany explained with a roll of her eyes. Something about Rick always made me uneasy. His name came up in our conversations too often for my liking, and the way she spoke about him left me feeling diminished. One day, I couldn't help but ask, "Don't you think you mention him a bit too much?" She'd laughed it off, calling it work talk, and assured me he was just a demanding boss, someone she found more intimidating than anything. But that night at the party, Rick didn't come across as intimidating at all. The event was lavish, live music, an open bar, and attendees dressed to impress. Tiffany and I mingled, chatting with her colleagues and sharing laughs. Yet, every now and then, I caught her looking across the room, her gaze lingering on Rick. His commanding presence seemed to draw everyone's attention, including hers. It unsettled me, though I tried to push the feeling aside. I convinced myself it was my imagination, a symptom of my own insecurities. As the evening unfolded and the drinks flowed, I found myself engrossed in conversation with a group of her co-workers. At some point, I realized Tiffany was no longer beside me. I scanned the room, but she was nowhere in sight. "Have you seen Tiffany?" I asked a few people nearby. Miley, one of her colleagues, hesitated before answering. "I think I saw her head upstairs with Rick," she said, avoiding my eyes. Her tone sent a chill down my spine. My chest tightened with an unshakable sense of foreboding. Excusing myself, I headed toward the elevator, hoping to find her upstairs, perhaps caught up in an innocent work-related discussion. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. My mind raced, each second intensifying my apprehension. When the doors finally opened, I stepped into a dim, hushed hallway. The contrast to the lively atmosphere downstairs was stark. Closed doors lined the corridor, some slightly ajar, revealing muted conversations and fleeting shadows. The festive ambiance felt tainted, replaced by something heavy and ominous. At the end of the hall stood Rick's office. Its glass walls were concealed by tightly shut blinds, projecting an eerie sense of privacy. My steps slowed as I approached, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Each step felt heavier than the last, but I couldn't stop. I had to know. As I neared the office, faint sounds seeped through the door, soft voices, followed by a muffled moan. The sound sliced through me, freezing me in place. My heart sank, my fists clenched involuntarily, and a cold dread settled deep in my gut. Part of me wanted to turn back, to preserve the illusion of normalcy. But the other part, the one that needed answers, refused to let me retreat. With a trembling hand, I pushed the door open. The scene inside confirmed my worst fears. Tiffany was on Rick's desk, her once pristine red dress hiked up, her hair a disheveled mess. Rick stood there, utterly composed, as if he hadn't a care in the world. Tiffany, on the other hand, froze when she saw me, her face draining of color. "Ben, she stuttered, scrambling off the desk and fumbling to adjust her dress. Her wide, panicked eyes met mine, filled with something between shame and desperation. "What the hell is this, Tiffany?" My voice barely broke the silence, trembling with a mix of fury and heartbreak. "Ben, I'm so sorry," she began, her voice cracking. "This wasn't supposed to happen." But I wasn't interested in hearing her apologies. "Didn't mean for what? To betray your husband with your boss at the office Christmas party?" My voice slashed through the silence, each word colder and sharper than I thought myself capable of. Rick stood awkwardly a few steps away, fiddling with his tie as though it held the answers he couldn't articulate. He didn't look apologetic. If anything, he seemed bored, as though this confrontation was an inconvenience. Tiffany reached out to me, her hands shaking violently, tears streaking down her flushed face. "Ben, please," she choked out, her voice quivering. "This isn't what I wanted. It was a horrible mistake, a terrible lapse in judgment." "A mistake?" I repeated, my laugh empty and jagged, bouncing off the empty walls around us. "You call sleeping with your boss a mistake, Tiffany? That wasn't some accident. It was a choice. Your choice." Rick, who had been mute up to this point, finally found his voice. "Look, Ben," he began cautiously, his tone almost patronizing. "Maybe we should all just calm down. Things got a little out of hand." "Out of hand?" I cut him off, my words raw with fury, my own voice unrecognizable to my ears. "You're her boss, Rick. The line couldn't have been clearer, and yet you went out of your way to obliterate it. What kind of man preys on someone like this? What's wrong with you?" Rick shrugged, a move so indifferent it felt like a match thrown onto an already raging fire. His nonchalance was infuriating, a stark reminder of how little he cared. "You're not even sorry, are you?" I growled, my anger boiling over. "You don't even have the decency to fake regret. You didn't just betray me, you turned us both into a joke." For a moment, Rick's expression remained blank, but then a faint, arrogant smirk played across his lips. "Listen, buddy," he said, his words dripping with contempt. "It's not my fault your wife's a slut. If she actually loved or respected you, this wouldn't have happened. Guess you weren't giving her something she needed." His words struck like shards of broken glass, each one cutting deeper than the last. Before I knew what I was doing, my fist shot forward, connecting with his jaw. The impact was satisfying for a fleeting second, a visceral outlet for the rage that had consumed me. As Rick staggered back, clutching his face, I stood there, breathing hard, the adrenaline coursing through me. But as quickly as the satisfaction came, it faded, replaced by something colder. A realization began to take shape, chilling me to the core. Rick wasn't some irresistible force. He was just a man who saw an opportunity and took it. The bitter truth was, Tiffany had chosen this too. She wasn't a passive victim. She had made the same decision. The searing anger in my chest dulled into a hollow ache as I turned to face her. My voice, once full of warmth and love, now carried a sharp edge. "How long, Tiffany?" I asked, my tone cutting. "Was this what all those late nights were about? Was this your secret?" She avoided my gaze, her eyes glued to the floor. The weight of my accusation hung heavily in the air, her silence louder than any confession. I stepped closer, my voice cracking under the strain of heartbreak and fury. "How long has this been going on? How many times did you lie to my face, telling me you were working late? How many times did I trust you, believe you, while you were with him? Was I that naive? That blind? Did you think I'd never figure it out? Or did you think I was just too stupid to see it? Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as she moved toward me, her hands reaching out as if to close the growing distance between us. Ben, please, let me explain. Don't, I snapped, holding up my hand to stop her. The gap between us felt insurmountable, as if her choices had carved an unbridgeable canyon. The woman I once knew, the woman I trusted, now felt like a stranger. Keep your apologies. They hold no value for me anymore. I shook my head, struggling to keep the fury bubbling inside from spilling over. The betrayal was suffocating. You've been lying to me, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of outrage and disbelief. You've been sneaking around with him behind my back. How many nights did I sit at home thinking we were fine while you were out there with him, breaking everything we built? Her face crumpled, and at last she spoke, her voice faint and shaky. I never meant for this to happen. I swear it wasn't supposed to be like this. I yanked my hand away from hers, looking at the tears streaming down her face. The anger I'd felt moments before had shifted into something heavier, a hollow ache that sat in the pit of my stomach. The woman I thought I knew, the one I'd loved for 8 years, now seemed like a stranger. The trust we had shared had disintegrated completely. I'm done, Tiffany, I said, my voice eerily calm, stripped of all emotion. You crossed a line, and there's no way to undo that. Ben, please, she begged, clutching my hands as if her grip could hold us together. I'll do anything, anything. It was a mistake, one I'll never make again. I swear on everything I love. Everything you love, I repeated bitterly, shaking my head in disbelief. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let this happen in the first place. The silence in the room was oppressive, broken only by Tiffany's muffled sobs. In the corner, Rick stood stiffly, his face a mask of regret, clearly unprepared for his so-called fling to implode so catastrophically. I turned to Tiffany one last time, my resolve unshaken. I'll send you the divorce papers after the holidays. Merry Christmas, Tiffany. She collapsed to her knees, crying and pleading for me to reconsider, but I was done. I walked out the door, leaving our shared history behind me. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, Tiffany's hollow apologies, and uncomfortable conversations with mutual friends who had caught wind of the drama. She tried everything to make amends, offering therapy, begging for a second chance. But every time I saw her, the memory of her betrayal loomed too large. Shortly after the new year, I finalized my decision and filed for divorce. Tiffany made one last effort to change my mind, showing up at my apartment looking haggard and desperate. Ben, please, she whispered. I'll quit my job. I'll cut Rick out of my life entirely. I'll do whatever it takes. But my choice had already been made. Tiffany, I replied, my voice steady but firm. I know you're sorry, and I don't doubt your regret. But your apology doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't fix this. That night, she finally seemed to understand. I think she had clung to the hope that I might forgive her in time, but I couldn't, and I didn't want to. To me, love isn't just affection. It's loyalty, commitment, and trust, qualities she had shattered beyond repair. In the months that followed, I began to heal. I started dating again, cautiously, taking care not to rush. Through mutual friends, I occasionally heard updates about Tiffany. At first, she stayed at her job but distanced herself from Rick. Rumors circulated that she'd been demoted, her once strong reputation irreparably damaged. Rick didn't emerge unscathed either. The scandal hit his career hard, and his standing at the company suffered. Before long, Tiffany resigned. The judgmental stares, Whispered gossip and strained atmosphere became too much for her. She didn't just lose her job, she lost the confidence and pride she had once worn so easily. The last time I heard from her was months later, in the form of a handwritten letter. In it, she poured out her regrets, confessing that losing me was the greatest mistake of her life and that she wished she could undo everything. I read it once, felt a fleeting pang of sorrow, and then tossed it in the trash. Because trust, once shattered, can never truly be rebuilt. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.